If you play Super Smash Bros., you've undoubtedly heard this question. Who would you pick to be part of the next Fighter Pass? I know I've been asked this at least a few times in the past, but I never really get to my answer. Not because I don't have a favorite pick, but because nobody wants to hear me monologue tirelessly about my favorite characters and why they're great or why their backstory is so deep. But you, the viewer, came here today of your own volition, so I'm assuming that's exactly what you came to hear about. This is going to be a discussion video where I pick a specific character, talk about their background, conceptualize a moveset for them, and discuss a little bit about how they play. When I first had the idea for this video, we were hardly through Fighter Pass 1. By the time I had the availability to make this video, we were already done with Fighter Pass 2, and the final character for Smash Ultimate had already come out. To me, this initially felt like I had missed my opportunity to make a video of interest. However, I'd like to add this detail that series creator Masahiro Sakurai has always reiterated. Smash Bros. Devs only consider video game characters when deliberating DLC. This limitation will not exist for these videos. While most of my characters I have planned will be from video games, some, including this one, will be from sources outside the realm of gaming. This is also roughly around the time where I've noticed, in most documentary-style videos, YouTube creators say something along the lines of, "Let's get into it," and post an animated intro. So, without further ado, here's my placeholder animation until I come up with a better one. Our first character comes from the unpredictable mind of Felix Colgrave, perhaps better known to some by his online alias, Master Aardvark. Having created a range of shorts and music videos over the years, Colgrave's animation style is denoted by bug-eyed characters, hallucinatory backdrops, and a tacit implication that hints at some greater allegory. The artist asserts that despite the perceived underlying themes of his work, he makes these cartoons just for fun. Commenting on one of his earlier works, The Pigpen, Colgrave states, "Some people think this film is about drug addiction. Others about capitalism, others about other stuff. I don't really mind how people interpret this, but mostly it's about piggies." To Colgrave, his art is a canvas for the viewer, rather than a concrete statement. Other notable works of his include The Elephant's Garden, Throat Notes, and a music video for Fever the Ghost's song, Source. The work we're here to focus on today is a 2-year labor of love that culminated in a 10-minute long psychedelic journey in 2017, known as Double King. If you haven't seen Double King yet, I recommend you go watch it to avoid any potential spoilers. Colgrave describes this work as a film about love and regicide, which even at surface level is pretty accurate. Double King follows the titular character, likely labeled such for the stacked pair of crowns he wears, as he wantonly murders other monarchs in pursuit of elevated status. Double King himself, like several of Colgrave's focus characters, is a character whose greed and cruelty are marginally more apparent than his true physical form, which is mostly left a mystery underneath his robe. Victims of Double King's conquests are all manner of beings, included, but not limited to, flies, rats, fish, mountains, mushrooms, and even death. The universe seems to continually bombard Double King with setbacks that would otherwise play out like an Aesopian fable. His adamant resolve and one-track mind, though, allow him to brute force his way unscathed by consequences throughout his quest. The film works because it can be enjoyed purely for its level of detail and world building, and for its commentary on the fickle acquisition of power. If you're like me though, you might have noticed something else. Double King uses a variety of methods and tools to enact violence on his perceived competition. Methods and tools that, in a different context, could serve as a moveset for a fighting game. The more I watched this film, the more I began to say to myself things like, this could be his taunt, or this could be his down tilt. So here's my concept for the Double King moveset. I'll start off first with the specials. On the off chance there are any viewers unfamiliar with Smash terminology, all moves are categorized by which button you press when you use them. One kind of move is performed by pressing the A button or the attack button. These kinds of moves are colloquially known as normals, and usually consist of close-up strikes like jabs and kicks. Another kind of move are performed by pressing the B button or the special button. These moves are usually projectiles or, as the name suggests, a special, iconic move related to the source material. Because specials are generally more flashy and unique to the character, I decided to animate these and relegate all other character moves to drawings. So there will be 4 special moves I'm going to explain before I get into the bulk of the character's moveset. Specials. Down B. For the first of Double King's special moves, his down special, we'll start with the very first one that I animated, Rat Trap. Early in the animation, Double King murders a Rat King who, according to the credits, is referred to as Augustus the Agreeable. Following his funeral, several of Augustus' subjects travel to Double King's castle to pledge fealty. Seemingly distrusting of the rats, Double King gingerly sets out a trap with a wedge of cheese as bait. For this move, Double King would perform a similar action, setting down a mousetrap and quickly shuffling backwards. A close comparison for this move would probably be Bowser Jr.'s Mecha Koopa move. Double King would lay down a solitary trap, and once the character gets too close, it would snap shut and pop the character up a short distance, leaving them briefly vulnerable for a follow-up attack, particularly covering a roll get-up at ledge. If the Double King player is not wary, however, he will be susceptible for falling for his own trap. A limit of 1 rat trap per use would be permitted to prevent covering the entire stage. Side B. Double King's side special would be Harg's Crown. Before dispatching Harg the Serpent Queen, Double King climbs her head and brusquely shoves her crown off with his 2 feet. For this move, Double King would manifest a crown before him as he coils back. Once released, Double King would spring forward and kick the crown ahead of him. The duration of this move is held for would determine how far and with how much knockback the crown is launched. Much like Greninja's Substitute or Wii Fit Trainer's Soccer Ball, Harg's Crown would not be a grabbable item, but could be kicked around for incremental damage. And while Double King cannot summon 2 of Harg's Crown at a time, he can kick the current one around as long as he sets up next to it. This attack would most likely serve as a knockout option on the initial launch, and as a conversion tool for small combo damage after becoming a neutral projectile. With a relatively short startup time, the attack would perhaps serve as a good burst option to cover space, but if an opponent became too accustomed to a Double King player abusing Harg's Crown, it would become easily punishable. Since the attack cannot be grabbed, a good Double King player would have to maintain strong control over the crown. Just as it can be used in his favor, they could also have it used against them. Used in the air, the move could also be used to close the gap while Double King is trying to recover. Up B. Double King's up special is Ovum Regia. While pursuing a butterfly monarch, Double King enlists the use of Ovum Regia, Latin for royal egg, a compact flying fortress seemingly inhabited by a living winged creature. Some structures throughout the Double King animation use eggs as a motif, so this one feels right at home. Though the vehicle only features briefly, it stands out as the strongest candidate for Double King's recovery. Ovum Regia would function similarly to the Star Fox crew's recoveries. The initial startup time would be rather lengthy. Double King would shuffle in place, grabbing the bottom of his robe. He would then hop up and curl into himself, revealing the Ovum's shell. Next, the bottom of the shell would turn, revealing the creature inside. Then, as the creature begins to frantically flap its wings, Double King points ahead, and away he goes. The attack, like the Star Fox gang's recoveries, would be omnidirectional. Depending on which direction is held, Double King might point a different way, guiding Ovum Regia in that direction. The move during the startup would be vulnerable to attack. However, once Double King is in motion, the attack would gain super armor. Though Double King could still rack up damage, he is for all intents and purposes invincible during recovery, reflecting his unflappable resilience in the film. Neutral B. Now, I've animated some of these moves a long time ago, which leaves me, unfortunately, with time to reconsider their place in the moveset. Such was the case with this move. I realized that there was a move that probably would fit better in this spot, but I'll get into that later. Double King's Neutral B is lifted from one of the most shocking and memorable scenes of the animation. Roughly 3/4 of the way into the film, Double King expires due to self-inflicted wounds. He is brought to the afterlife where he is permitted to join a feast with other monarchs he had slain. When offered a seat by the death matriarch, Agatha, Double King attempts to nab her crown. After exhausting all options to steal the crown, Double King begins to throw a tantrum. Until this point in the animation, Double King's physiology is mostly unseen, save for his hands and eyes. During the tantrum, he bears a fearsome set of fangs, fixed on a jaw that appears to be as wide as his entire body. Though his rage is relatively self-contained, this sudden, unexpected reveal, coupled with Colgrave's sound design, makes for an unsettling scene. Tantrum, as I've simply called the move, sees Double King faithfully recreating this moment from the film. When B is held, Double King begins to clench his fists and his pupils dilate. When B is released, he will begin slamming his fists into the ground, creating shockwaves next to him. A similar example to this move would be Donkey Kong's down special, Hand Slap. Standing close to Double King would cause mild damage, while standing next to him would rack up damage and knock back more severely. The attack would auto-link the first 2 strikes on the ground, and the last strike would send opponents flying out to the sides, so it would be advisable not to get caught in this move. The duration for which this move is held would increase its duration and severity. A short hold would yield a low commitment tantrum, 1 strike, where a long hold would play out the full animation and output maximum damage. Double King's remainder moveset will be explained through brief illustrations, drawn with attention to detail to imitate the scenes by which they were inspired. Like the specials, I've given some of them corny names to relate back to the source material in some way. I'll start with different categories of attacks, followed by movement options, and then end with miscellaneous animations and character gimmicks. Normals. Spork and Knife. Double King's jab takes inspiration from the scene where he prevents the Lord of the Flies from stealing the rotted pumpkin crown. He stabs forward first with his knife and then with his spork. The knife has a hitbox that knocks the opponent a near negligible distance away, while the fork has an auto-link hitbox that pulls them back in. Double King does not have a jab flurry or a finisher, rather having a 1-2 style jab similar to Samus and Alamar's. Even though two alternating attacks lead into each other, they are spaced far enough apart where, as damage percentage increases, the attack becomes easier to escape or fall out of. Banquet Beeline. Double King's dash attack is a reference to his dash to obtain Agatha's crown in the final scene of Double King. He will dash forward, holding his hand out ahead of him, extending his hitbox. In addition to being a fairly heavy dash attack, this move will travel fairly far and may cross up opponents, allowing it to be safe if spaced properly. Flycatcher. Double King's forward tilt is similar to his jab, borrowing from the same scene. This time, he will attack with both his spork and knife simultaneously. This move does not have much knockback, but rather auto-links, pulling his opponents in, allowing it to transition into his jab attacks. Arch action. Double King's up tilt has him very casually swinging his head backwards. While not explicitly performed this way, this is a light nod to the scene where Double King, misjudging the clearance of his new crown through his castle's archway, scrapes it rather nonchalantly. The attack would function similar to DDD's up tilt, but performs significantly less knockback. Royal Seat. Seemingly out of boredom, Double King will kick his feet out from underneath him and let his weight drop to the ground. He does something similar in the animation when he becomes lost in a garden after chasing a cockatoo. This move will have two hitboxes, one that is a direct body hit and another that is a mild shockwave hit when opponents stand too close to Double King. This move would have a little bit of end lag, so it would probably serve as a perhaps risky get off me option. That about covers all of Double King's normal grounded attacks. Next, let's cover his aerial attacks. Falling Crown. Double King's neutral air is an animation where he spins inside of a large crown. Similar to the scene where he tumbles off a cliff, the attack would function similar to Kirby's Nair, sending opponents away. It would also have invulnerability towards the crown section, clanking with enemies' attacks while his head and body would be vulnerable. Socket Shot. Double King's forward air would be a solitary punch from one of his large fists. Socket Shot gets its name from the scene where Double King punches Agatha in the eye when he fails to steal her crown. The range of the attack is quite short, though the knockback it deals is quite severe, similar to Mewtwo's forward air. Backstabber. Paranoid and power-hungry, Double King severs his own finger to obtain a small crown he had previously taken from the Lord of the Flies. Though not a direct copy of this act, Double King slashes downwards to attack literal would-be backstabbers from attacking him. The move shares similarities with another move I will get to later. Bird Snatcher. Double King does not discriminate very much when it comes to crowns. There's a particularly funny scene where rather than picking up a conventional crown, he seeks to steal the crest from a cockatoo which resembles one of his own crowns. When reaching up towards a cockatoo, he hops up and swipes at it with both hands. This action is a direct inspiration for his up aerial, where Double King swipes above him and too close yet separate intervals. Snake Armor. In contrast to his previous aerial, there's a particularly gory scene where Double King inhales Serpent Queen Harg through her head, with two large golden blades. This is imitated in Double King's down air, where it produces two swords and holds them beneath him while falling. The initial hitbox sends his opponents away as he pulls the blades out, while the blades beneath him will spike airborne opponents and bounce grounded opponents. The hit detection on this move lasts for a long time, similar to Link's down air, making it a strong option against anti-air attacks. Smash attacks. Blunderbuss. Double King produces a blunderbuss and fires it with deadly force. Holding the charge on the smash attack increases not only the damage output, but the range at which this attack will hit an opponent. The move can also be angled slightly, depending on whether an up or down input is received during the smash attack. Something else of note, upon review of the film I noticed that this blunderbuss isn't as seemingly random as it initially appears. If you rewatch the very first scene of the animation, you'll see Double King plodding past one of the Rat King's guards in the stairwell. The guard's blunderbuss shares the exact same design as Double King's, indicating that he may have obtained it shortly after this scene. Severance Pay. After exhausting all other prey, Double King sits down and notices the ring on one of his hands, almost as if seeing it for the first time. In an effort to secure the crown-shaped ring, he takes one of his blades and tries to sever his own finger. I imagine that this move would inflict damage upon Double King to some degree. However, if an enemy finds themselves inside of this move's small hitbox, they would receive a grievous amount of damage to either their shield or their damage meter. Despite being a smash attack, this move does function somewhat like a special. Earlier in the video I mentioned that there would be a move I would be discussing later on. Severance Pay is that move. Despite being a smash attack, this move does function somewhat like a special. Had I planned out these moves earlier on in the animation before the specials, I probably would have switched this with Double King's Tantrum move. Regal Knievel. Midway through the animation, Double King attempts to scale a large, king-shaped mountain, aided by a large mechanical fortress. After subduing the mountain with several heavy pummels, he prepares to fire himself out of a cannon to begin his invasion. For this move, Double King enters a small replica of the cannon as it charges, and fires him straight into the air upon release. Because Double King is wearing a helmet, he will receive partial invulnerability for this move, and depending on how long the move is charged, Double King will ascend higher proportionally. Grabs and throws. Mice Grip. Double King grabs his opponents with his large, singular hand, referencing the film's earliest scene where he extrudes Augustus' skull from his head. In a similar fashion, the opponent's character model would pinch inside of Double King's hand, adding to the comedic effect of the move. Moist Scepter. With his opponent firmly inside of his grasp, Double King will softly beat his opponent with a fish-themed scepter. This scepter is one that Double King confiscated from Ronald the Moist, a fish king that he slew earlier in the animation. Double King's low-effort strikes mimic his lackadaisical assassination of Ronald, yielding very little damage. King's Cannon. Double King's cannon from his up smash returns. However, this time he is not the passenger. Rather, Double King will force his grabbed opponent inside of the cannon and, once it's loaded, cover his ears as the cannon ignites. This move will hurl his opponents directly into the air and, at high percentages, have good KO potential. Even though all characters are invulnerable during most of their throw animations, Double King still keeps safety in mind, donning his helmet. Pump King Drop. Double King will raise his opponent up before suddenly propelling them towards the ground. He dispatches Lady Gertrude of Squash in this manner, though instead of splattering his opponents across the ground, they bounce forward instead. The low bounce angle would allow for Double King to follow up his throws with a quick burst option or jab reset if his opponent lands the right way. Skull Toss. Another reference to Double King's encounter with Augustus is this move. Double King swings his opponent to the side and flicks them behind himself. This would be a moderate throw as it wouldn't kill, but also wouldn't set up an opponent behind Double King for an immediate follow-up. This move borrows its name heavily from when Double King tosses the Rat King's skull down a flight of steps in his own audience chamber. Serpent Stamp. Towards the end of the animation, Double King manages to repeatedly disfigure Harg by leaping on her head, forcing her to impale her skull with a fork. In much the same way, Double King leaps onto his enemies, causing them a good bit of damage, but not without slamming them face first into the ground. While no forks are present, the opponent may become stuck in another way, facing a bury situation once Double King stamps them into the ground. Movement. Crouch and Crawl. Double King doesn't necessarily have any animations from his source material where he's crouching or crawling. However, his crawling animation does draw from a quick few frames where he clambers the table in the movie's final scene. As he lifts himself onto the table, there's some frames of animation where he is tucked in close to the table in a crouched state. His first several steps from his crouch could be seen as his crawl animation. His crouch and crawl will be relatively low, allowing Double King to low profile or duck underneath many attacks that would otherwise hit other characters. Sneak. In the final scene of the Double King animation, Double King observes the great bounty and the former victims of his quest for royalty. As he descends the steps to presumably dine with his fallen adversaries, he takes small deliberate steps down the staircase. His sneak animation would replicate this walk cycle on a flatter surface, slowly moving Double King's body across a platform. Walk. Double King's walking animation pulls from the first scene in which he approaches the Rat King's throne. As Double King nears the Rat King, his gait transitions to one that lacks the usual squash and stretch of a typical walk cycle, as his center of mass appears to glide across the floor. While his feet move, Double King's body remains in a fixed vertical position. Run. Sourced from the final scene of the animation is Double King's run. In a mad dash to acquire Agatha's crown, Double King leans forward and each of his two bottom limbs kick out from underneath his robe. Despite his size, Double King moves relatively quickly in comparison to other heavies, such as Donkey Kong and King K. Rool. His run speed would be comparable to that of some of the game's lighter characters, such as Marth. Jump. While Double King does not jump often in the original animation, there are portions where he is airborne. After Agatha halts his attempt to steal her crown, she lifts him up by a telekinetic force and places him back in his seat. During this sequence, Double King flails his legs about helplessly. Similarly to Yoshi's midair jump, Double King will shuffle his feet midair for his initial jump. For Double King's midair jump, he will float in the air as his cloak flutters behind him. This animation references his leap from Harg's head following her assassination. While his initial jump does not provide much aerial mobility, his midair jump will launch him much higher, similar to Mewtwo, Ness, and Sora's midair jump. Caterpillar Entourage. In the beginning of the movie, Double King is brought in on a throne. The throne is adorned with statues of bipedal reptiles on each side, and placed precariously atop 6 pillars held by 2 caterpillar-like creatures. Similar to King DDD's Waddle Dee servants, these caterpillars march Double King onto the stage, allowing him to step off and assume his starting position at the beginning of each match. Hit stun. When hit, Double King's pupils become dilated, and his body assumes a crooked stance. This pose references his stunned look when Agatha squeezes him in the movie's final scene. Edge attack. When Double King returns to stage, he takes a large step forward, thrusting both feet ahead of him, similar to his side B attack. This is again a reference to his animation where he kicks Harg's crown off her head. Knockback. When Double King is launched, he enters an animation similar to his jumping animation with his feet shuffling about. However, his body slowly tilts back during the duration of his launch to indicate he is not in control of his trajectory. This, like his initial jump, references the scene he is thrown telekinetically by Agatha. If Double King is launched, he will enter his tumble animation. Double King's tumble animation is an allusion to his descent when Harg nudges him off a cliff with her dying breath. Unlike the source material, Double King's fall is absent of the crown with which he inhabited. Double King tumbles much more quickly to justify the stylized animation smear frames he features. Flop. When Double King lands after a tumble, he will enter his flop animation. In this state, he lies on his back, feet pointing up. Additionally, his eyes will lose their color slightly. This references the scene where Double King is first delivered to the afterlife, as the moon scrapes his corpse onto the landing platform. Shield. Double King calls upon the same ovum regia referenced in his up B move. Similar to Yoshi, another character who resides inside of an egg, Double King's shield size will remain constant while the color of his shield will start to darken until the shield is either broken or dropped. Parry. Double King's parry animation also takes place inside the ovum regia. However, the pose he strikes references a different scene in the animation. After finally acquiring a third, albeit oversized crown, Double King raises both of his fists in jubilation. For this animation, Double King will also raise both of his fists out of the ovum regia to signal a successful parry. Victory animations. Following a victory, the winning character will freeze frame in a victory pose. During Double King's victory animations, a variation of the kill mission theme from the beginning of the Double King animation will play, and one of these 3 animations will be selected. Settled in. This victory scene shows a crown dropping into focus, Double King quickly following it, circling the crown in an animal-like manner, and stuffing as much of his form into the crown as possible. This scene references a similar event, wherein after defeating Harg, Double King asserts his place of dominion, having gained a new crown. Double Crown. The second victory scene shows Double King gingerly dropping a crown onto his first crown, the act that gives him his moniker. Double King can be seen performing a similar action towards the beginning of the movie, following the assassination of Augustus. Spaced Out. Double King's third victory scene features him wearing Agatha's massive crown and leaping off a cliff into a weightless void, floating elated and carefree in his achievement. This references the ending of the Double King movie where, when he finally acquires the third crown, he leaps off the world, characterized as a massive lion turtle, and into space. Gimmicks. Decrowned. Double King's gimmick is a feature that is meant to balance the character's knockback power and heavy weight. When Double King receives 75% damage or loses 75% of his stamina, a situation may happen where he loses his crown. I chose the number 75 as a light nod to the mark around which Double King loses his crown, about 7.5 minutes into the 10-minute long animation. When landing at this percentage, if Double King does not tech or press shield upon impact with the surface out of tumble, he will enter his flop animation and has a high chance of losing his crown. The crown is a grabbable object for other players, but not for Double King himself. Approaching the crown will simply prompt a re-crowning animation, similar to King K. Rool. While Double King is decrowned, he will receive slightly increased knockback and damage, as his weight will decrease. Any hitboxes that include his crown, such as up tilt, will also be slightly reduced. While this gimmick is not necessarily reflected in the animation, I figured it would make a nice little nod to a situation from another Nintendo property. In Super Mario 64, if Mario loses his cap, he will not only lose an essential part of his iconic look, but will also receive additional damage from enemies. In a similar vein, Double King would also sustain augmented damage, until he recovers his crown. Alright, so that just about wraps it up for Double King's moveset. I'm pretty satisfied with how each move came out, and I'm glad I didn't really have to fudge or stretch too many of them. At this time, if I haven't lost you yet, it's probably safe to move on to another topic of conversation, so let's do that now. The next section is one of my favorites to discuss. These are the alts, or alternative costumes. These are changes in the character's rendered model from simple palette swaps to entire costume overhauls. Growing up with Smash 64, I always enjoyed swapping the character's color palettes because it hinted at the consideration of other characters and Easter eggs. While some palette swaps were simple recolorings to satisfy the game's need for color-coded teams, others were callbacks to characters not included in the game at all. Mario's yellow costume, for example, featuring purple overalls and green shoes, was an obvious reference to Wario, a character whose debut in Smash would not come until 9 years later in Brawl. Kirby's yellow costume was likely a direct reference to the competing pitches for his color palette, which resulted in his desaturated Game Boy cover art. For Double King, I picked his 7 alternate costumes based on his Monarch rivals. Although these changes are mostly relegated to color changes, I included several texture changes that a game developer would have a relatively easy time implementing. Double King's first alt would be an orange costume based on Augustus. The Rat King's outfit was a robe in a similar faded reddish hue to Double King's, but closer to orange than purple. Underneath his robe, he sports a yellow collared shirt with even brighter yellow cuffs and collar. These colors substitute the pinks and blues of Double King's outfit, aligning him more closely with the Rat King's color palette. Double King's second alt would be a gray costume based on a goat monarch seen earlier in the film, who, according to the credits, is titled Queen Daisy VII. Daisy's coat are several shades of a desaturated tan. I picked the 3 most extreme shades in her color palette to serve as the 3 colors on Double King's robe for his alt. The third alternate costume would be Double King's purple alt, based on Strata Monarchus. Promptly after the crown falls off of Queen Daisy's head, and is suddenly imbued or corrupted with royal power, Double King would adopt the Cloud King's gray and purple palette not only for his robe, but also for his glowing red eyes and narrow pupils. The fourth alternative costume would be Double King's green alt, based on Lady Gertrude of Squash. After Strata Monarchus obtains his crown, he unleashes a heavy downpour that converts an ordinary pumpkin into royalty. Very briefly, however, as a jealous Double King promptly smashes her. The 2 tones of her robe would serve as the main color of Double King's robe, highlighted with a pumpkin orange trim. The fifth alternative costume would be Double King's black alt, a reference to the simply named Lord of the Flies. Inhabiting Gertrude's rotting crown, the Fly Lord's body is mostly dark gray, with some shades of gray making up his jaw and underbelly. These colors would be transferred to Double King's robe. Additionally, Double King's pupils would be changed based on the yellow tone of the Fly's eyes. The sixth alt would be a cyan costume based on King Ronald the Moist, a large fish creature that Double King hauls from the sea and bludgeons to death with a scepter. Double King's robe would reflect the sea green shades of Ronald's body and fins, while the yellow trim would resemble that of his lips. The final alt, and perhaps my favorite to make, would be Double King's red alt. This costume would see the greatest overhaul to not only Double King's color palette, but also introduce a pattern on his robe. This costume would be inspired by Dirt the Elder, a stiff quadrupedal mushroom Double King encounters later in the animation. This costume would borrow its gray trim from Dirt's body, and its brown trim from his feet, while the largest area of the robe would be white polka dots on a red field, similar to his red and white cap. Double King's eyes would also gain shades of gold and yellow, similar to Dirt's as well. Stages. The next section features my stage pick for Double King. His stage wasn't exactly an easy one to come by, as the animation spans a good number of locations. Some considerations I had given were the Afterlife platform, Death's Feast, the garden where he severs his finger, and the Butterfly Heaven realm. I didn't really feel that any one of these fully represented the animation on their own, and considered a transitioning stage similar to Castle Siege or Mute City. This, however, would have required significantly more work, unfortunately, and I decided it would be better to settle on one location instead. One consideration I had made was Double King's castle, part of which is featured briefly in 2 scenes of the animation. The majority of the castle is cropped out of view, so it would limit what was visible, and there were no other references really to pull from. However, after Colgrave released the Royal Noises OST, I noticed that the top of what appears to be Double King's castle is shown. The castle was designed to be slightly asymmetrical, yet balanced for the most part. So keeping this in mind, I cobbled together a castle from its known locations and a bit of imagination to create Double King's castle. Double King's castle's left side is a near identical copy of the rectangular cropping featured early in the animation. In its Smash Bros. Stage form, it's viewed from a side profile angle, rather than an angle perpendicular to the corner. The top of the castle is primarily based on the Royal Noises OST. The middle and lower right sections of the castle are based on my interpretation, and where I imagine the kitchen will be located based on its appearance in the film. Although the bottom of the stage is relatively close to the ground, I chose simply to have the stage drop off towards the bottom into the blast zone. The stage would transition through a day and night cycle. The transition between day and night occurs very suddenly on the stage, with the sun edging across the sky and the moon quickly popping up. This references the shots where the sun rises and sets between each major scene of the Double King animation. In the background are scenes that will be recognizable to eagle-eyed fans of the short. On the left is a clearing that Augustus' servants traverse to reach Double King's castle, albeit flipped facing the castle this time. To the right is an orchard of trees featured outside of Double King's dining room window. In the distance behind this is the mountain realm where Queen Daisy is first featured in the film. Another quality of the stage are omnipresent pairs of eyes that appear in many of Colgrave's films. Double King's castle features a selection of windows that, at randomized intervals, will feature eyes that peer outward from the darkness within. Sets of mysterious eyes are featured in a number of places throughout the animation, providing the impression that the world itself is alive and watching its inhabitants. In the castle, it can be assumed that these eyes are perhaps subjects or prisoners of Double King's rule. The stage's biggest gimmick is its transversability. In the beginning of the cartoon, Double King descends a set of winding stairs to reach the ground floor. From this, it can be easy to imagine a fighter becoming lost inside the castle if its inside is as haphazardly designed as its outside. To reflect this, a set of doors would be accessible to characters that hold an up input in front of them. When a character enters, they are expelled out of an exit selected at random. The layout of the castle may appear confusing, so I've color-coded different areas to demonstrate how they would function. Grabbable ledges are represented by yellow squares. These are areas where characters will enter the ledge hang animation if airborne. Blue and red rectangles represent surfaces that characters can drop down and jump up through, much like elevated platforms on most Smash stages. The red rectangles denote flat platforms, while the blue denotes slanted platforms. Green and purple rectangles represent walls and ceilings respectively that can't be traversed in both directions. Characters will pass through these surfaces on one side, but cease all momentum when they come into contact with these walls from the other side. Finally, pink represent the aforementioned doors that players may pass through and exit from throughout the stage. As an added level of design, one particularly special door would be accessible only by the shorter end of the character cast, such as Squirtle or Kirby. The Omega version of the stage would feature the top portion of the castle in the background. The base platform would feature barred windows, similar to the ones featured on the Royal Noises album cover. Occasionally, eyes may peer out of these windows, much like the base stage. The Battlefield version would be identical, save for the 3 platforms, which extend out from the base platform. Each platform is supported by a single or pair of elongated hands, much like the structures found underneath some of Double King's balconies. Alright, so the last section I'm going to address is the music for Double King stages. With every Smash stage, series music is borrowed or remixed and available for play during a match on the corresponding stage. In Double King, all the music was composed by Colgrave himself, who, according to the artist, used public domain samples of Gregorian chants and GarageBand to make each track. If you watch the animation, you'll notice that each of these songs lasts no more than 30 seconds, hardly enough to match the fast-paced rhythm of a fighting game. This was until Colgrave released extended versions of each song on a soundtrack titled Royal Noises in Dead Kingdoms, the music of Double King. Even still, however, only a select couple of songs from Double King possess music with a fighting game spirit. Fortunately, 2 remixes of his tracks were also included in Royal Noises, which elevate 2 of the tamer tracks to a more pulse-pounding pace. Additionally, Smash has also set a precedent for borrowing from insular works to build up a series tracklist. Both DLC fighters Terry Bogard and Minecraft Steve borrowed music from spin-offs or titles created by the same developer. Therefore, it wouldn't be a stretch that the Double King tracklist would not only feature music just from the film itself, but rather all works Colgravian. Though still bare, here's the would-be tracklist for Double King stage. Enjoy the samples and be sure to listen to the full tracks if you enjoy them on Felix Colgrave's Bandcamp or the respective artists' sites. If you're at this timestamp, it most likely means that you've endured the video this long. I hope this gives you a clearer view not only into my taste as a Smash Bros player, but also entertains some of the ideas that you yourself would have liked to see implemented. Despite this being a massive tribute to the Double King movie, it is nonetheless a fan tribute, and I'd be negligent not to mention the series creator Felix Colgrave. You can support Felix's work on patreon.com/Felix Colgrave. Since Double King, he has created several visual masterpieces, so I'd recommend at the very least giving his other works a look. As a fan of the Double King movie, this is simply my humble opinion on how I think his moveset will work. There's a strong possibility you may have a different idea on how any of his moves could function. Maybe I even missed a glaring opportunity for a clever move or mechanic. Comment below with any ideas, suggestions, or what you may have simply done differently. If you're looking to keep up with the rest of my work, you might want to follow me on social media. I'm on Twitter at SlampbellPrez, on Instagram at Slampbell_presents, and on Twitch at Slampbell. Hopefully I have the efficacy to produce more of these moveset episodes. In the future I may be looking into crowdsourcing options, but for now, enjoy these simply as my gifts to you, the viewer, and keep an eye out for my future videos. To make this easy for you, I'll recommend hitting the subscribe button below so you don't miss any future content. And with that, I'll leave you with some splash art of mine that emulates a Double King character reveal. Until next time.